If sometimes you're out of words and you don't know what to pray, that one will work in any situation. How great is my God. Today we're going to be talking about the 23rd Psalm. It's some of the most beautiful literature that's ever been written in the world. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He leads me through the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. He restoreth my soul. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. My cup runneth over. Thou anointest my head with oil. Surely, goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. These are words that comfort us. These are words that lead us into a deeply personal connection with God, and for that, they are beautiful. I'm going to talk a lot about the Bible today, and I know some people get a little nervous about that, because unity folks in the Bible, sometimes it's a little tenuous, because a lot of people were beat very severely around the head and shoulders with the Bible, spiritually as well too. And it was often used to convince us how small we were, how unworthy we were, and how infinitely awful we were. And of course, in unity, we don't teach that. We teach that you are an incredible expression of God in this world. And sure, we do some junky stuff, but we're getting better. I used to do a standard joke in unity churches. I would say, okay, if you'll turn in your Bibles with me to the 13th chapter of John, everybody goes, Bible? You're supposed to have a Bible? And they'd look in the pew, see if there's one up there. There's no Bible. If you still are nervous when I talk about the Bible, go ahead. I spent decades being nervous about it and not liking it. And what turned me around to it is when I had a Bible teacher named Frank Judici in seminary that taught me to understand and read the Bible metaphysically. And I'm going to give you an example of that today and how we can use that with this psalm so that it not only becomes inspiring and beautiful literature, but it becomes something that is deep and rich and guiding for us in this life's journey. It's a fun thing to do. Can you read this word? This word? YHWH. How would you say that? This is the Hebrew name for God. Because in the old scriptures of the Hebrew culture, you were never supposed to say God's name. Only the priest, once in one ceremony in a year, was allowed to say it, and he could only say it once. So it essentially is an unpronounceable word. Now, as it got translated into English, we added vowels to it. And so the vowels turned it into Yahweh or Jehovah. But God was held in such awesome esteem by the Jewish people and by us as well too, but there was a different kind of relationship that they had with God. And it all started in history, and thanks to Cecil B. DeMille in 1956, we are able to see what this is all about.
We're gathered against you, Moses. You take too much upon yourself. We will not live by your commandments. We're free.
Hey, there is no freedom without the law.
Whose law, Moses? Yours? Did you carve those tablets to become a prince over us? He showed you no land flowing with milk and honey. I show you a God of gold. Come with me. Follow me.
Blasphemers, idolaters, for this you shall drink bitter waters. God has set before you this day his laws of life and good and death and evil. Those who will not live by the law
That's certainly not something you'll see very often in a Unity church. Thank goodness. That's pretty amazing. One of the things that this brings us to an understanding of is that for the earlier parts of Jewish history, God was not so much perceived as a deity, but God was law. This is the law. And that's what I want you to think about for a minute, because that's how we're going to interpret the Psalms metaphysically. This is from Milton Steinberg, who's an author of a book called Basic Judaism. He wrote, moreover, as a non-creedal religion, some have argued that Judaism does not require one to believe in God. For some, observance of Jewish law is more important than belief in God. Now, that's certainly not for all and most Jewish people that I know, but there is a possibility within that religion that you understand God as law. So what I want you to do is to imagine now we're going to substitute the word. In the Old Testament, whenever you see the word Lord in all caps, you ever see that sometimes? It's not just L-O-R-D, but it's L-O-R-D. That's the substitution of the word. And my Bible teacher told me the way to understand a lot of that scripture is every time you see that word Lord, substitute the word law. Okay? So now we're going to look at the 23rd Psalm and see what this might say. The law is my shepherd. I shall not want. The law is my shepherd. The reason I love looking at it this way is because in the original 23rd Psalm, everything is out to the Lord. Everything is up to God to do. This is different. There's a law. And what's going to work is if I obey those laws. Do you understand? I need to follow those laws. And what might they be? What laws can you think of that might help us to not be in want? Okay, to not experience lack. This is from King Solomon in Proverbs. He says, honor Jehovah with thy substance and with the first fruits of tithe of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy vats shall overflow with new wine. So you see what he says? Here's the law. You give to God, and your barns are going to be full. Does that make sense? So if this law is my shepherd, and I follow this law, I shall not want. Does it make sense? Of course it does. That's part of what we call the law of giving and receiving. If we're trying to hold on to everything, we'll never be able to receive more that's coming. So that's very important. Catherine Ponder is one of the great unity writers of our time, and she said, 10 is still the magic number of increase. Regular, consistent tithing of 1/10 of all channels of your gross income to the priest, minister, church, spiritual organization, which inspires and uplifts you, is still one of the surest ways to permanent, satisfying prosperity. You will not want. Catherine Ponder points out that 10 is established in Hebrew scriptures and it's used throughout. It's a very powerful number for her. Just recently, we even had a little book we showed you called 10. And that little book had within it some spiritual laws, that if we can follow these spiritual laws, you will not be in want. That makes this poem, this incredible piece of literature, even more powerful. It goes on, the law maketh me to lie down in green pastures. It leadeth me beside the still waters. Now, this is an important piece of line on many different levels. Remember where the Jewish people lived was mostly desert. So can you imagine what a green pasture would be? Wow. It'd be so lush and luxurious. And of course, in a desert, there'd be water. This is pretty fantastic. But that's the literal interpretation, and it's good. What's also true is that it's a metaphysical interpretation. Where are the green pastures inside us? That place inside us where we can rest. And the still waters, this is a hurricane sometimes up here. So what he's saying is he can lead me, these laws can lead me into a stillness and into a beautiful calmness. Now, here's the test. Gee, what kind of spiritual practice or law could do that? Gee. What do you think it might be? Thank you. I told you I'm going to make you say it every week until you're all getting it. Meditation leads us to the green pastures. Meditation, as a spiritual law, to meditate, it will bring you into those cool and still waters inside. I like it because it's not that we're not the ones relying on God to do all of this. We get to do it through understanding the Lord as law. This is from Psalms, who says, those who love your law, speaking of God's laws, have perfect security, and there is nothing that can make them stumble. That's like leading us to green pastures, restoring our soul. This is the promise, but the promise, if you look at it, is from the law. In the Jewish culture, the word shalom is typically translated as peace, but the root of that word is actually wholeness and completeness. So when the verse says he restores my soul and leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake, it's the law that restores my soul. Are you familiar with any of the kind of famous, wonderful laws that Edwene Gaines has composed in her book, The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity? It's an amazing book. One of those laws that she talks about is the law of forgiveness. Now, if we're going to practice forgiveness, and you sincerely practice forgiveness, is that going to restore your soul? Is that going to re-enliven you and make you stronger? It leads me in the paths of righteousness, which is like right way, for his name's sake. So if we just can follow many of these spiritual laws, they're all around us, but what's important is that we participate in them. We don't just say, God's going to do this and God's going to do that, and I'm just going to get blessed. What it says now is that there's things for me to do. There's practices for me to engage in. There are guidelines and activities that I should be involved in, and those guidelines and activities will bring me all of the promises of the 23rd Psalm. Every single one of them. Psalm 119 says, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing in the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. Marion Brown is a wonderful unity writer, and she sums all of this up in one statement. We can avoid many difficulties by learning the spiritual laws and principles and by being obedient to them. Do you believe that's true? Okay, so here's what I want you to think about now. The 23rd Psalm is about us connecting with the law and using that law to bring us all of those promises that are there. It's not a passive thing. We have to get involved. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes with me for just a moment. All of this involvement is requiring only one thing from us, and that is a commitment. A commitment that says, I want to know what these laws are, and I want to live by them, because I want every blessing that's given in the 23rd Psalm to be mine. I want to live in that peace. I want to live in that abundance. I want to live in that wholeness. In this quiet time together, as you connect with the God of your being inside, I'm going to ask you just to consider that commitment. Would you be willing to try these spiritual laws and see if the promise comes true? Consider these things as we now come together in the sacred and holy silence.